Hi YouTube, welcome to Pagan Perspective. This is Megan, aka Sabiristry, and today we're all talking about movie and TV influences, basically media in our path. So I'm doing this again on my phone. I'm sorry, I'm having some like crazy internet issues right now, and so I actually filmed this entire video on my regular camera on the SD card because I got the thing to plug into my iPad and all this stuff, but now I won't connect to the internet. So I'm not sure what's going on. I am in my new place, which is really awesome. We are like seriously like 5 minute walk to the beach. It's amazing. So that's really cool and I'm really excited. And honestly, I think once I get my computer and everything is better, then everything will be better. So right now we're just doing the low tech thing, or I guess higher tech because it's from my phone. But either way, let me get started with the video. So I really thought about this one for a while because this idea of, movie and media influences in our path is really interesting because it would kind of be naive to think that, the media didn't have some sort of impact on us. I mean, when you look at it, the media, whether it's TV or film or whatever, has such an impact. Sometimes we don't even know how much of an impact. We'll say something and we won't even know where it came from, but it really was introduced in some TV show or even on some commercial. There are so many things that are in our culture now because of the media that, have made their way in a way that I wouldn't say insidious because I don't think it's malevolent, but it's sneaky. It's downright sneaky. So, we think about marketing and things like that. So, for example, there are brands that their name has become synonymous with what they sell. So, for example, now some people say, when they sneeze or need to wipe their nose or something, they'll say, "Oh, can I have a tissue?" But a lot of people will say, "Can I have a Kleenex?" And if you ask for a Kleenex, everyone knows what you mean. Like, it's synonymous now with having a tissue. So, and that's because of media. That's because of all these influences. So, when I thought about this, I'm like, all right, let's just kind of break it down and let's see how I am influenced by media and things like that, and consciously or unconsciously. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of unconscious things that I don't end up talking about today, just because they're unconscious and I'm not always that sure of them. And they'll probably, like, next week or something, I'll be like, oh, that, I should have mentioned that. But, whatever. I'll do what I can. So if we talk about the big ones, so what are the big ones when we're talking about, any sort of pagan genre in the media? Well, one, Harry Potter, right? The Craft, Practical Magic, Charmed, most recently probably Secret Circle and Witches of Eastwick. Let's see, The Good Witch. There's a Hallmark movie as well as like a series. I guess you could even go so far as to say any of the other kind of supernatural stuff, because they do have a lot of witch elements in them sometimes. So, anything from grim to supernatural to even Once Upon a Time. I mean, any of those things really could in some way have an impact. Let's see, there's a bunch of fantasy magic series too. I just started watching, what was it, the Shannara Chronicles. I guess they're doing another season, which I'm glad for. It actually is a pretty good show. I never read the books, so it could be really wrong as far as if it falls in line with it. But as far as just the show is concerned, it's fun. It's easy watching, easy sci-fi kind of watching. So all right, so those are some of the big ones, right? Those are like the big heavy hitters. So let's start with my favorite, my personal favorite, which is Practical Magic. Now, Practical Magic, there are things that I actively not only plan to, but have incorporated from Practical Magic into my practice. And these are on a conscious level. So that goes on a step even above the unconscious, contributing. So Practical Magic had a Book of Shadows, in the show, in the movie, that was brilliant. It was awesome. It was so cool. And of course, I had to have one. So right now, I use that Book of Shadows as an herbal Book of Shadows. So I basically put all of the, edible and healing type herbs and things like that in the front part. And then the back part, anything that is dangerous, anything that, could be bad, like belladonna is back there, and there's just other things. I don't want to go too much into the stuff that will hurt you, just because for me, I think there's a certain amount of responsibility, being on the internet or anything like that, and I don't want to, but everyone knows belladonna can kill you. I mean, that's from the movie, and yes, do I keep belladonna tincture on hand? I do. It's something that I'm an herbalist, so I have a lot of those kind of things and a lot of other stuff too. So, but that's something that I really like, is that book, and I loved the way it opened and everything. I do like the scrapbooking method that they did in it. I know that that's been very popular for a lot of people. I like scrapbooking even before practical magic and sort of that idea. I will say the one thing that I haven't adopted, which I think a lot of people have adopted based off of the sort of the idea of Charmed and primarily practical magic, and I think even like Secret Circle and stuff like that, is this idea of Book of Shadows looking old, looking real old. And I get that. I get people want it to look old, but wanting it to look old doesn't make it old. And that's been sort of my struggle with all of this, and being hereditary, the things that I have are old. And so I understand why people want to make it look old, because they like that look. But at the same time, think about how it's going to age. If you are actually passing this down from generation to generation, yes, a lot of people use archival quality inks and things like that. But if it already is hard to read now, and it's ripped and torn and smudged and all of that, think of what's going to happen when you are using this with kids, and and you're trying to pass this down from generation to generation. It's going to get downright impossible to read. So for me, I have, Family Book of Shadows, and then, I am creating a new, larger one for my new family once that gets going, just so that I really love large tomes. And I am, I'm decorating it, I'm making it cool, like kind of scrapbooky style, and really beautiful, and calligraphy and all of that, but I'm not trying to make it look old. It will look old eventually, and that will look amazing, but I want that aging to be unique and its own thing. So, and I also don't want to, hurt its archival quality. I want it to last as long as possible, and if it's new, it's new. That's sort of the way it is. It doesn't mean that the information is new. It just means that the writing is new and stuff like that. So anyway, that's my take on that. So definitely the book, The Kitchen from Practical Magic. Oh my gosh. So I don't know if I mentioned this in here, but my wife is an architect. And so, when we thought about what kind of house we want to build eventually, and, we haven't decided where we want to build it yet, but when we do want to build a house, that kitchen is my kitchen. Like, that is my ideal kitchen. I would love it. I love that kitchen. I wouldn't like the stairway thing though to the attic. Like, I'm sorry, I grew up in New England. I know those attics. Yeah, they look cool and all of that, but they are a haven for dust and bugs and spiders and mice and creaks and cracks, and oh my gosh, the upkeep on that place must be atrocious. So yeah, so I wouldn't be super keen on that. Plus, I don't know about you, but those kind of stairs, like, they look really cool for like a movie, and the midnight margaritas like spiraling upwards and all of that looks really, really cool. But try going up and down that every day, like when you have like toddlers or something like that, or going up and down every day, to go to the bathroom or get laundry, or, I mean, all of those things would just not make it super practical. So definitely don't like that. I love the idea of midnight margaritas. I think that's something I definitely will consciously, try and add into my repertoire. I probably will make it midnight something else, so that I can do it with kids, like midnight mangoes or something like that, just something fun. Plus I'm not a big drinker, so I guess that's part of it. Yeah, so definitely those components. I love, some of the sayings that came out of practical magic, like not wanting to be, normal, because it rather denotes a lack of courage. And I love that. I love that. And I think it's an important statement. And so I definitely use that. So that's sort of been incorporated into, my life. And when I say my practice, I have to, comment that when I talk about my practice, I'm talking about my life, because to me, they're one and the same. My practice is my life. I don't delineate the two. I mean, I have specific ritual and things like that, but really, to me, this is my life. It's my lifestyle. It's who I am. It's part of me. And you can't separate out my religious beliefs from my life. They're not two separate entities that I can, have, okay, one here and one there. It is who I am as a whole. So one movie that I think is interesting to talk about in its influences is The Craft. So there really isn't anything from The Craft that I have ever taken away from, except one comparison. And I haven't really morphed this into sort of The Craft, but I have used this statement when explaining things to non-pagans before. And that is, at one point, they are trying to explain their made up, and it was an intentional choice to make up this god so that they wouldn't offend anybody, that they would just use a completely made up god for the movie, which, back in the day I used to hate that, because it made people think that was an actual god. But now I actually appreciate it, that they intentionally went with something made up so that it was more fiction. And I do appreciate that. So anyway, this fake god is Mano. And they're explaining Mano and the Christian God and the Christian devil. And they're saying that if the Christian God and the Christian devil were opposing football teams, that Mano would be the stadium that they played in, would be the sun that shined above them, would be the grass that was below them, would be everything. So that Mano was this bigger entity in this bigger form. And so I use that as the way to describe the god and the goddess, and saying that, the players, all the minor deities are all the little players, down below, and the god and the goddess are everything that they are in, everything and all around them. So I do like that comparison. However, the rest of it wasn't so. I mean, it's, in high school, I saw a ton of these girls walking around with those black choker things. They're back now. Have you seen that? I actually, when I was moving to Maui, I found one in my suitcase, or no, like box somewhere, like old jewelry box or something. I think I threw it away, which I'm like kicking myself now, because I had an original one from the 90s and I threw it away, but everyone seems to be wearing them now. It's crazy. So yeah, so they would wear all this dark stuff, and and I was very out in high school, and I remember these girls coming up to me, and they sat down. They were all in black and everything, and I was wearing, I don't know what I was wearing at the time, like something just regular, like nothing, out of the ordinary. And they sat down in front of me at lunch, and they're like, "So we hear you're a witch." I'm like, "Yep, I am." They're like, "Well, we don't think that that's funny. Like, you're giving everybody a bad name if you don't really know what it's about. Like, this is serious. It's a religion." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know." And so they start quizzing me about different things and stuff like that. And I'm like, "Okay, when did you start practicing? Like, really? Like, let's look at this for a second here." Yeah, it turns out they had seen the movie The Craft or something and started practicing a month before or something, or read, Silver Raven Wolf's, To Ride a Silver Broomstick or something like that. Which, great, that's awesome. If that's how you want to go, roll with it. Rock on. But to come up to someone and be like, are you one, kind of thing, with the dude. Anyway, I answered their questions enough to be satisfying, and they're like, "Okay, well, we just needed to make sure you're legit." And I'm like, yeah, too legit to quit, whatever. Like, so they didn't never bothered me again. And I think like the next year they were into something completely else. I don't know. They were like Rastafarians or something the next year. I don't know. I feel like they kind of did a lot of fad stuff. But hey, if they're still into it and they found a calling, then that's amazing. If that brought you to it, more power to you. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with, with some of Silver Ravenwolf stuff, anything that can bring, open your mind and bring you to it. That's awesome. The idea of like shaming other people or trying to like get up in people's faces and being like culty and all that, like, ooh, dark and mysterious. I'm not all about that, but to each their own. So yeah, so that would be the craft. Harry Potter. Oh my gosh. Like, right. Like, come on. I mean, when I was younger, so I did, for those of you who know what this is, LARPing. So that's live action role playing. And if you don't know what that is, basically think of Dungeons and Dragons. If you don't know what Dungeons and Dragons is, look it up. I don't have enough time to explain it. So anyway, it's live action Dungeons and Dragons, basically. So anyway, I did LARPing. And so, we were weird. We dressed up, we went in the woods, we hit each other with plumbing supplies, crazy. But one of the things that we did is anybody who wasn't one of us, like when we went out to a restaurant, like to eat after a game, we'd all be dressed up still and we'd look really weird. And so people would stare at us and stuff, but they also wouldn't understand kind of the coolness and the special world that we had. And so we called them mundanes. So, because we would also call, like, if we were in our regular clothes and not in our LARPing clothes or our garb, we would call that mundane clothes. Like our regular, like mundane is just boring and regular, right? Those are just boring, regular stuff. And so we'd call people mundanes, like in the, in BDSM world, they call people who don't do like anything kinky, they call them vanilla, right? It's just plain. So we would call them mundanes. Well, hilariously enough, you don't hear people saying mundane anymore. Like, you just don't hear it. Like, that was back in the day, and that was before Harry Potter. Now, they're called Muggles. Anyone who's not a geek or in the know of, like, the geeky world or whatever is called a Muggle. Oh, yeah, they're such a Muggle. Like, right? It's so interesting, these words that just influx into our vocabulary. And so, even in the pagan community, anyone who's not pagan can be called a Muggle now. And I think it's hilarious. It actually like happens. I've heard it happen many, many times. So, that's one thing. And then also I think I've seen a big resurgence in wand work. A lot more wands, especially a lot of wooden wands that are shaped in the Harry Potter style. So like growing up and things like that, a wand was always something that was very personal. So, my personal wand is, found wood. And, it actually happens to be from Ireland. So it's very important to me. But it's not shaped, it's not honed, it's not turned on, a wheel or anything like that. And so it's not a Harry Potter wand. But I've seen a big resurgence in the pagan community with these Harry Potter wands, the style wand. And so I think that's really interesting that that's come into it. It doesn't mean they're not powerful. Of course they're powerful, but it's an aesthetic quality. And so it kind of gives just that feel. And I've also noticed a resurgence in robes and things. And also in spoken spells. So oftentimes, for me, a lot of spells would be long. They'd be drawn out. They would have multiple components. And that's how those are things that I would do, but in the same vein, in public things, that's how I would see spells more often. And then recently, over the years, I've been seeing more, very shortened verbiage, very singular verbiage. So, Wingardium Leviosa, things like that. But, this shortened verbiage for spells and things instead of these longer written out ones. And so I think that's interesting. It's a way that sort of Harry Potter has influenced pagan community. So then you look at something like Charmed. I think Charmed had a huge, huge influx on the pagan community, primarily because of the Book of Shadows. I mean, I can't tell you how many pagans, how many witches I know have the Charmed Book of Shadows. Like, that's the one they want. That's what they fill it with different things, Oftentimes they'll still use the Book of Shadows, the front page, the front cover page. They'll still use that one too, and they'll use like, a couple of other things like Wiccan Read and things like that. They'll use those in their own personal Book of Shadows. So something from a TV show is actually, come into their own practice. Now, it's not something I do. The Triquetra is beautiful, but it doesn't hold, the same meaning for me that it does for a lot of other people. But Triquetra is ancient. We're not talking about a symbol here that Charmed made up. So it's just the way that it is, like having a green, large tome with the red Triquetra on it. Like that's what the show did. And so when you see that is, hearkening back to that. Now, some people just like it, and that's just the way it is. So there's nothing wrong with these. In fact, I don't think there's really anything wrong with media influencing us. I think it's one of those things where we just have to realize that everything influences us. Life influences us. As we go through life, we're going to meet people and have experiences, and all of those things are going to change us and alter us in some way, for good, for bad, for indifferent. And, we just need to keep understanding and growing and making sure that the path that we're growing on is the path that we want to be on, and that some way enriches us. And so I think that's kind of, my biggest takeaway from it. I know I love some of these shows. I'm a huge sci-fi fantasy geek. So for me, I just enjoy these kind of things anyway. But, so I kind of take it out of it. It does bug me. What bugs me is when, things try and, get stuff and then they do it wrong. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I get so upset at the Salem witch trial movies. Anytime they do anything on the Salem witch trials, it absolutely drives me crazy. I was a tour guide in Salem when I went to college there. And all these people say, oh, well, there's this, and oh, well, there's this. And it's like, come on, no, there was nothing in the rye bread. Oh my God, people. It was about money and power. That's all. Money and power. That's it. So, but anyway, and when they get it all wrong and stuff, or the worst is when they try and say that witches were burned in Salem. That drives me up a wall. Witches were not burned in Salem. Witches were burned, people accused of witchcraft were burned in England, okay? Because it was considered heresy, okay? But here, witchcraft in the United States, okay? Witchcraft was considered a crime against the state, which means it was only punishable by hanging. That's it. Hanging. Only one. The only one who wasn't hung is Giles Corey. He was pressed to death. But he wasn't pressed because he was being accused of witchcraft. He was pressed to get a confession out of him, because they couldn't take his land or his money until they got a confession. Either, I did do it or I didn't. They needed to have something. They needed to have him say, plea in some way. And he wouldn't plead because he didn't want his land to go away, because that's what Sheriff Corwin and Judge Hathorne wanted. They just wanted people's money, people. That's it. It's all about money. It's always been about money. It's just the way it is. So anyway, no one was burned in Salem. Only hung. That's it. 19 men and women, 2 dogs. That's it. That's what happened. Okay. So those kind of movies, they get my goat. But the other ones, I like it, and I think they influence, our path in lots of different ways, and they're fun. I certainly, I cosplay, a Hogwarts student. I did it at Aresia this past year. I loved it. I have, my Hogwarts gear. I'm a Gryffindor through and through. So, I think there are some things that are just fun, and it's fun to be in that world and to be entranced by it, and it makes its way into our practice, and that's okay, because as long as we're making sure it's enriching our practice and not taking away from it, then I don't see a problem with it. So I thought this was kind of a cool topic. And any topic ideas, we definitely would love some cool topic ideas. If you have them, post in the comments, or best is to go to our Facebook page and to post there with any topic ideas that you have. You want to hear me talk about a particular topic, you want to hear some of the other subs, I'm a regular host now, hear some of the other regular hosts talk about a topic, or if you have a topic that you want the subs to do. So, we try to keep it not directed at a single person, but if something that you have that you think would be interesting to hear from one person, but you would love to hear from everybody about it, that would be really awesome. We would love to have some more topics, some more interesting topics to be able to talk about. And yeah, so that would be about it. And yeah, so I think that is probably it for today. And as always, guys, blessed be and aloha.